you ever wondered why you aren't getting the results, relationships, or life that you want, or why some of your clients run into the same problems? I'm certified life coach Lindsay Pullman, and I'm here to tell you that there's nothing wrong with you. There's just more to understand about the multifaceted beauty of the human body. I believe that being trauma informed is an essential standard of care for coaches, and I'm here to support life coaches who recognize that there is so much more than mindset work when it comes to supporting ourselves and our clients responsibly. So glad you're here. Come on in.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're all doing so well this time of year. I hope you're enjoying your fall. I hope the weather's treating you well. Oh, there is so much happening in the world these days. And I just hope that wherever you are, whatever you're experiencing, you're finding a proper balance of honoring yourself, your nervous system, and being informed as it makes sense to you and your body, your nervous system safety. And I just want to offer that there's so many different ways to respond to these different collective life events. Because of course, we're affected by, what's happening collectively on this earth. And we also have our micro lives where we can make an impact as well. And so let's just make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And I just want to say that there isn't a right way for everybody to respond to these things. For some people, it is more of that activist side, speaking out. And for others, it's sitting with words and information and thinking about it and doing something that they know that they can do, right? There's so many different ways to absorb or to process. Some people freeze a little. Some people, get into fight, flight, or fawning, different trauma responses as well. And so I think we tend to be hard on ourselves, especially if we grew up in, Western culture, kind of that first world culture. And so please be kind and compassionate to yourself, because a lot of collective elevation of consciousness comes from doing that on an individual level. Okay. On that note, I'm so thrilled to talk to you guys about thoughts. And it's something, in the coaching industry that, of course, we talk to a lot, different ideas like your thoughts, creating your results, different things like that. And I want to clarify some stuff that I've learned over the years so that you can really support yourself with sustainable change, whether it's habit change, healing, growth, or something else that you're looking to switch up. Okay. And if you want, go ahead and make sure you check the show notes of this episode, because I have a free resource I'm giving away. It's called A Gardener's Guide to Thinking. And it's something to support you in maybe switching up the way that you handle the thoughts or vibrations that come to your awareness. So make sure you check out those show notes at the end of today's episode as well. Or check them out right now so that you don't forget. I think the way that we approach and interpret mindset is huge. And that's why I have my own trauma-informed mindset framework in my certification programs that I teach, because the one-dimensional approaches that I have seen that I was even trained in are limiting, in my opinion. And before we get there, I just want to share with you, I'm recording this right after the funnest little weekend that I had with my kids in this cute little town. You've probably heard of the term calanques, like the famous calanques in the south of France. We have calanques where I live as well. They're these beautiful, gorgeous red rock ones. If you follow me on social media, you have seen me post, pictures or images when I go for bike rides and things like that. Well, a few hours, just under 2 hours to the west of us, there are these world famous calanques in Cassis. And we met up with a friend of mine from the neighborhood I grew up in. They live in England now, and met up, and our kids had the funnest time together. It's always amazing to, my friend put it one way. She said, vacations are the best, but vacations with friends are even better. When your kids are all getting along and distracting each other and making fun out of everything in a new city. It was so fun. We actually didn't get to go see the calanques because the wind was crazy, but the wind was also crazy enough that it made for these gorgeous waves for our kids to play in. So they still had a blast. We had plenty of gelato. It was amazing. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you because it's fresh on my mind, and I'm still smiling just thinking of my kids meeting these new little buddies and just jumping in and becoming friends with them right from the get-go. It's just something I treasure, the way little kids play with each other. And we, in our adult way, I guess you could say we did that too. Okay, so let's get back to the thought stuff. Okay. When I speak to one dimensional thought work, some of you might be asking, what's this one dimensional approach that you're talking about? The one dimensional approach that I'm speaking to refers to any linear model that are a little more either or, all or nothing, in a sense that your thoughts always create your results. Okay. Can you hear the absolutism, if that's a word, in that phrase, right? Where it's like, it's always your thoughts that create your results. Okay. Or like, if you don't have the results in your life that you're wanting, it's always because of your thoughts. Your thoughts always lead to your emotions, which lead to your actions, which lead to your results, different things like that. It's pretty linear, all or nothing. And personally, I don't think that it's inclusive of a broad spectrum of humanity. And that's why I see it as an approach, but not the approach, because we're so multidimensional as humans. We all have different set points for how we experience our lives. And so to say that there's this one way that works for everybody because it worked for you, there are going to be problems with promoting this idea because, first of all, if the people that you're promoting this idea to unconsciously place you as an authority figure because of your status, and then you're teaching these things in this, either or, this equals this worked for me, it should work for everybody way, then what can happen due to our socialization is when people try to do it your way and it doesn't work, and they try and they try and they try, they turn that against themselves and they can really tend to self-gaslight. And even if, maybe that's kind of a little bit of their a subtle automatic response. And then if you believe in that model, you might layer onto that with them. Oh, right. And you might think, oh, this doesn't work for me because there's something wrong with me. But here's the deal. I really do think how we present ideas to the public, to our clients, is paramount in making sure we add qualifiers to let people know this is a way it worked for me. There are a lot of other ways. So if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Okay. I've just seen too many coaches, too many clients come to me from other coaching programs or, from other coaches who feel horrible about themselves because they tried it that way, the linear way, and they couldn't get it to work. Okay. How come she could get it to work, but I can't? What if that's not because something's gone wrong with them? What if nothing's gone wrong with them? What if it's actually more of a signal that things are going right? Okay. What if there's just more to understand? So this is why I want to speak to a little bit more about how I see thoughts today. And just so you know, when I say it's a way, I do mean that thought work, this one-dimensional linear model, can be a way for people. And I think the reason it is a way for people is because it does provide a space to slow things down and see patterns and things like that. And the thing with these different one-dimensional linear models that therapists teach and that, coaches teach, it is a great intro point. It can be a great bridge, right? I'm not going to say it's a great bridge for everybody, but it can be a great bridge for a lot of people to start learning about patterns, their brain, and really just slowing things down and being more present. Because anytime we're slowing things down and taking a look, becoming more of an observer of our experience, our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, to look at those think, feel, act cycles, this can be a form of presence to a degree. So for me, when I was going through a lot of my stuff, I'd done a lot of therapy. My therapist had taken me to a certain point, which was really, really impactful. I'd done so much processing, which was necessary for me. And I was simultaneously feeling disempowered with respect to my current set of circumstances. Okay. I was feeling disempowered. I was still feeling pretty reactive to the things that were happening in my life because there was a lot happening. And so when I found thought work, there was this big pendulum swing where I started learning these ideas. Your thoughts create your results, your thoughts create your results. And it was so helpful for me to a degree until it wasn't. Because the thing is, if we lock into this idea that it's just your thoughts that create your results, what I have seen is that we take it to too much of an extreme. It can become a little bit of a callous approach or an isolated or separated approach to being a human. because then we think everything is up to us. And then we separate ourselves a little bit from humanity and from our relationships. And so for me, the ideal space is not in this disempowered side of the spectrum where we feel really reactive and at the whim of, all the behavior of those around us. It's also not on this illusion of extreme empowered side of the spectrum where no one can hurt me but me with their thoughts or their words or things like that, right? I like to think of dropping that pendulum down into this grounded, empowered space in the middle where we're still connected to humanity, where we recognize the multidimensionality of our mindset, where we know that ultimately a lot of what we do want in life does come from us and does come to how we decide to show up and different things like that. But it also creates space to recognize that, of course, there's impact from other people's behavior. Of course, there can be impact. Of course, the energy of people that we're interacting with in the world today affects us. Okay. And there's plenty that we can do to support ourselves and feel grounded and release energy that isn't ours. But to me, this grounded, empowered space also helps me feel so much more connected to those around us. And I want to be connected to humanity. I don't want to feel so incredibly independent that I'm not connected to people around me. Okay. And so, again, I think if we take that really extreme approach, no one's thoughts can affect me unless I let them. We're missing some stuff there. Okay. And again, just speaking to this idea of impact is really, really important, which I'll speak to a little bit later. But right now, what I'm going to talk to about is one big space where I can see this getting messed up is where, this idea of your thoughts creating your results is that oftentimes emotions and other cues and sensations get misinterpreted as thoughts. Okay. There's a lot of research out there that has been done to figure out what comes first, the thought or the emotion. And from the trauma trainings that I've done, some experts say it really is a millisecond of a difference. And so however it helps the person to think about it can be helpful. Just it's a tiny, tiny difference, right? Other experts say that the emotion does come first through, that's what the research supports. And so this is why it's so important to be mindful and to use cognitive frameworks that support people where they are, because a lot of times it is the emotion coming up first. We just interpret it as a thought when there's actually something to attend to attune to, an emotion, a vibration that's coming to our awareness to pay attention to. And the thing is, for some people, it does feel like thoughts come first. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense too, because we've just been taught to be so prefrontal cortex focused, so thought focused. When we can really stay up in that prefrontal cortex, it keeps us out of our body. So we don't even really know how to pay attention to these emotional cues or sensations or vibrations that are coming up to our awareness. And then we translate them into thoughts. But does that actually mean a thought derives an emotion, or is an emotion coming up, right? And so this is why I think having a proper framework to support people and meet them where they're at is so important, which is what I have and offer in my certification programs. Okay. So I don't want to speak to your lived experience and say that this is how it is for you, but I just wanted to share where that research lies so that you can pause and check in and see what resonates with you. Okay. And I think it's part of why I see it being such a problem when we misinterpret emotions as thoughts is that if we've been taught that what's something that's actually an emotion is a thought, and then it comes up to our consciousness, and then you happen to have a coach or someone who, may be dismissive of that thought, then we're not paying attention to those emotions that not only were not attended to whenever you were younger, sometimes, because sometimes it is younger, older stuff, but also emotions that are ready to be attended to in the moment. Okay. So while your logical mind might see that certain things aren't true, if we just dismiss things as quote unquote just thoughts, it can be really dismissive to these emotions that really are ready to be felt. Okay. So trapped emotions, younger childhood wounds, past traumas, when we dismiss that stuff, it's not what we need for healing and growth. And as coaches, we're not meant to, of course, handle every single thing that comes to the surface. And so that's another thing that we talk about in my program is how to distinguish, what we can support our clients with versus what to refer out, which I think is really, really important. Okay. And again, when it comes to healing and growth, attending to the emotions that come to our consciousness is paramount. So this is not just information for coaches who are helping people after, heal after big things with certain specific niches that might look more towards the people that are healing. This is for business coaches because when you're supporting growth, I see healing and growth as simultaneous and interwoven. And so there's no niche that can sustainably avoid working on emotions, in my opinion, because that's usually what people really, really need support with. Okay. And I think it can do harm too when we just see everything as thoughts, thoughts, thoughts. Okay. Another way that this can be a problem is when there's trauma. If we have some sort of trauma stuck in our body, which is part of the human experience, I'm sorry, but most of your clients that come to you, they don't know if they're carrying trauma. So trying to say, oh, I just do business coaching or action-based coaching. So we don't focus on the emotion thing. They just need this action stuff. That doesn't mean that unresolved trauma or unprocessed emotions aren't running their lives and steering the unconscious ship in some way. Okay. Because when we've experienced trauma and we haven't worked through the wounds that come up, our nervous system continues to navigate the world as if the trauma is still ongoing or, as if that threat is still there. So does this impact our behavior? Yes. Even if we're business coaches, yes. I know so many women that are afraid to make tons and tons of money because they feel like they're betraying their family in some way. Okay. And so there's just a lot of different ways that this still pops up and it does impact our behavior. And so that's another reason that one-dimensional model can be incredibly limiting because when there's something that we need to listen to, work through, process, or refer out to somebody to process, right? Some deep processing, we can't be saying that this is just a thought. It can be incredibly limiting. It can even do harm. It can be damaging, right? And again, if people are coming to us who trust us to support them, let's make sure they don't get re-traumatized because of our lack of understanding of trauma so that they can receive the appropriate support that they deserve. Okay. Another reason that this one-dimensional stuff can be limiting is, and again, I would say do harm is when our clients are in ongoing abusive relationship scenarios, circumstances. A lot of times when your clients are experiencing emotional abuse, they don't know that they are. And if you don't know what emotional abuse is, and if you're not tuned into that as a coach, and if you don't know how to present that to your clients, which is stuff we go through in all my programs, then they're bringing this stuff to you and then you're dismissing stuff, that they're working on and bringing to you as thoughts. Just change your thoughts. How do you want to think about his behavior? It's like this total nervous system override thing, and it does not work in the long run. And it can, and it's just almost like a continuation of what they've already been experiencing and to some degree in their lives. Okay. And so when there's ongoing abuse, we sometimes need to change circumstances. We need to change other things. We need to set boundaries. We need to learn how to create safety in our bodies. And a lot of times that doesn't come with becoming so callous that we couldn't possibly be impacted by someone else's behavior, because we absolutely are. So there we go with the ongoing abuse. Another way I see this, any linear models being so limiting is that it just isn't inclusive and doesn't support our multidimensionality as humans. So while one-dimensional thought work can work for people and it can work for some, generally we want to make sure that it's clear that that's not how all humans work. So while it's a way for some, it's not a way for all. And if we tout from our microphones that it is the way for all, then people who can't figure it out because of, maybe they're marginalized to some degree or carrying trauma, or again, the ongoing abuse, different things like that, then they're going to, especially with women, because we tend to internalize if we can't figure out the same way as other people, we internalize typical default belief systems that just aren't true. Well, it's probably because it's my fault that there's something wrong with me. I just can't get it right. This isn't meant for me. Okay. And so, again, if you know people where the one dimensional approach has worked, that's great. And I just want to say that it does represent a sliver of humanity. And that's why there are a fair amount of people who've been able to use this work, create a lot of success from that. I just want to be clear that it's not the way for everybody. And so having an approach that's more supportive of humanity, a broader spectrum of humanity, is so much more inclusive to help people normalize their body's cues, normalize their responses, and how their body speaks to them specifically. Okay. And really develop a loving relationship with our body's intelligence, our oneness, our being, our existing. A lot of our existing is about being present in the here and now, more about that than always thinking our way to calm. So to me, the ultimate act of being a human and living your experience here is more about being and existing. And a lot of that super present existing, it doesn't always happen with our thoughts. I can think of so many times where I get myself to calm via so many different other avenues besides just thinking my way to calm. So again, I'm not going to say I haven't thought myself to calm or used thought work as a layer to other means to support myself in creating more calm and peace. It just isn't the way. And that's why you can see how limiting this is if we think all of our feelings come from our thinking, because it's a way, but there are so many other ways. And then on top of that, when it comes to really accessing your unique intuitive gifts, this one dimensional approach that not only doesn't support it, but it can't support the multidimensional ways that we are designed to access and receive intuitive hits and experience our and develop our intuitive gifts as humans. Okay. So that's another huge thing that we're missing as we really live into this multidimensional experience. All right. The multidimensional framework is a foundation that supports us to really open up to our unique gifts, our unique spiritual gifts, so that we can access and utilize those in our businesses, in our lives, in our relationships, or wherever we want our focus to be. Okay. So those are some of the reasons why I think that it is limited. And now I'm going to talk about what I see thoughts as being and what I see thoughts as not being. Okay. And then I'll give you a few ways at the end that I like to think about thoughts that could potentially be helpful to you. Okay. So yeah, as you take this in, just see what resonates with you. And please know that the things that I am listing out aren't all inclusive. Okay. All right. So what thoughts are? Thoughts are a combination of words in your head. Okay. They can be sentences in our mind. They can be interpretations of experiences. They can be a combination of words in our conscious awareness. They can be phrases. They can be informers, a way to receive information sent up to your consciousness from your nervous system, your body, your intuitive senses. That's the one that I really, really love. That's the way that I think of it a little bit more. And I actually think of emotions as informers too, in that same way. Thoughts are vibrations. Thoughts are and can be vibrations that have come out to your consciousness that you've interpreted as words. Over time, thoughts thought enough become beliefs and belief systems. Over time, what you think in the long run will determine your reality and results in life. Now, I say in the long run because I don't want, any perfectionistic people out there to get into this either or space. I want you to think about how you're trending, how intentional you are. Okay. Thoughts are something to be curious and compassionate about. Sometimes thoughts or belief systems are programmed, conditioned, socialized, or placed on us before we knew we had a choice to say no thanks, or when we needed to accept and internalize them as true as a means of survival. Okay. I think that's really, really important so that I'll explain why, but I think that's really important to be mindful of, is that some of the stuff that comes up to our consciousness isn't there because it's true necessarily, but we might have had to accept or internalize it to get by with respect to whatever our specific set of circumstances was when we were younger. Okay. What thoughts aren't? Thoughts aren't always true. Thoughts aren't always the problem. Okay. I hear a lot of coaches say this. It's the thoughts that are always the problem. They're not always a problem. Okay. I think there's something to listen to. I think there's something to be curious and compassionate about and not be judged, because especially if we have thoughts that come from our programming that we've inherited, belief systems we've inherited, conditioning, socialization, we first of all don't need to identify with the stuff that comes to our awareness as we become aware of thoughts, right? Especially because, we have around 60,000 a day. So it's more about where we're trending, right? But also, I like to trust that whatever's coming to my consciousness on a given day is something for me to work with on that day. So it's just this, I think our lives are the sustainable long-term results come from what we're kind of just tweaking sustainably day by day. So your thoughts aren't always the problem. Sometimes they're informers and they're trying to tell you something. And please don't let your thoughts be representative of who you are as a person overall, because sometimes we just need to vent and bring stuff to consciousness, bring stuff to light for it to evaporate and dissolve and be released. Okay. So you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are not you. Our thoughts are not something to judge, because this sets up an environment non-conducive to healing. And so it doesn't mean that thoughts aren't there for us to look at sometimes, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But, when we get on that more judgy shame side of the spectrum, that usually doesn't set us up to properly release them the way that we want to. Okay. So what I'm going to do with the rest of this time is just talk about two different ways you can think about thoughts. The way I normally do it is more of like if you're just getting started on this, I would say maybe use the gardener approach, but you can always use the gardener approach. And as you're feeling more empowered and where you're at, you can also think of take this bouncer approach on. Okay. Because, remember, before you were the age of 25, your brain wasn't fully developed. So a lot of stuff that you internalize may really have been to survive or to be liked in some way, shape, or form, because we are relational species. Okay. So if you're feeling like you're in a pretty good space with thought work generally, one kind of fun way you can think about it now is that, like, as thoughts come up to your awareness, you can think of yourself being the bouncer at a club or a party. And, maybe people are just kind of approaching the door, right? They're coming in, like approaching the door to come in and chill, right? And what you can do is just, maybe when you were younger, right, before your brain was fully developed, or while you have been in ongoing abusive relationships, or while you were a child, or things like that, maybe these quote unquote people or thoughts, they could just walk around you and get in, right? Like you couldn't really do much if a lot of stuff came at once. And so we can just have compassion for that. And now that we're an adult and if we're feeling pretty grounded, you can be aware of some of the stuff that I've spoken to. And now as thoughts come to your consciousness, you can decide, you can be the bouncer, right? When these thoughts come into your awareness, you don't have to always wonder. Sometimes it can be helpful, of course, but you don't always have to wonder, like, ew, how did this thought come? Why is this one here? Ew, how do I still believe this? Why is this one here? It can just be like, not interested. Like, you don't need to come to the party today. No, thank you. No, thank you. Oh, yes, you sound good. Oh, I like you, but let's blend that with you, right? Like, you kind of decide who comes into the you party, right? And you can decide what to send away. You can decide what to bring in. You can decide if there's something more to learn about a thought or something like that. And so just becoming, kind of taking on that like empowering, proactive space of being like, yeah, I'm going to be the bouncer of what comes to my awareness, but I don't have to judge every one or every thought that comes to the door, right? Like, why would they want to come? Like, there must be something wrong with me because that person wants to get in, right? No, it doesn't have to be that way. Okay. Another way I like to think about it is as a belief garden. So gorgeous belief garden. We all have these beautiful belief gardens. And maybe you weren't always the gardener of your belief garden, right? Maybe when you were a kid or when you were younger, other people that came into your energy sphere would plant beliefs for you, or you would internalize stuff. And so stuff got planted that wasn't even yours, or stuff might have been planted in that garden before you were even born, which, yes, that can happen, right? With transgenerational trauma and epigenetics and things like that. So maybe we weren't always in this space where we knew we could be the gardener of the garden, or where we even had the choice to be a gardener of the garden, right? And how is it different now? As you step into becoming the gardener of your garden, how can you tend to this belief garden and really make it yours, right? And how differently will you approach it when, just as stuff comes up, weeds or beautiful roses that were or may not have been planted by you come to the surface, right? Some roses may come up that you couldn't have even imagined, but you love it and you want to tend to it and nurture it. Some weeds or something else may come up and you might be like, yeah, not interested. I don't know where that came from. And thank you, next, right? And so again, some of this stuff planted by neighbors, parents, siblings, media, different systems, cultures, different things like that. You can take a look, and sometimes it makes sense to know why it's there so that you can really make a shift towards or away from certain belief systems. And other times you can just decide what you don't want, right? So now is the time for you to decide what to prune, what to plant, what to nourish, what to discard. And I love this approach because then when we see a weed or a flower we just don't like, we don't have to judge it. We just take care of it. Okay. And again, some stuff is going to be deeper than others. Some plants are easy to pop out and discard and some aren't. And that doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It can just be it makes sense that it takes a little more tilling to get rid of certain things. Okay. Another reason I like to think of the garden imagery is because we don't have to just plow it all down and start over, right? Because even if you plowed down the surface, there would still be stuff deeper than that would come up, right? It's more just, again, I love little sustainable approaches. What little sustainable thing can I do today to help this garden? Maybe it just needs water today and attention and love. And maybe we'll do some weeding or tilling tomorrow. If you like this garden approach, let it just be this ebb and flow of, sometimes there's a lot of work to be done. And sometimes, again, it's just the watering. And if this is something that you're interested in, be kind with yourself with respect to your thoughts. That's really the point of a lot of this. Know that you weren't the gardener, or you weren't given permission to be the gardener of your garden, or that there was even an option for that. And what if it's different now? So are you ready to become a part of our forever community of trauma-informed coaches? Go to lindsaypullman.com and see if my advanced certification is a fit for you. And don't forget to take advantage of the Gardener's Guide to Thinking in the show notes. And if you've enjoyed this podcast episode, I would love for you to leave me a review. Have the best day.